Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Krishna. I am from Newburgh Diagnostic Marketing Team. Today webinar we will be talking about managing kidney health during the lockdown. Dr. Grease, who will be taking us through different parts of the kidney health, including for the people who are on dialysis. Dr. Grease has more than 18 years of experience, out of which more than 10 years he has worked in the United Kingdom, and from last 7-8 years he is currently practicing nephrology in Columbia ACO Hospital, Hebbal, Bangalore. So I'll request Dr. Grease to take it further and brief us about how do we manage our kidney health during this COVID period.
Thank you, Krishna. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, at the outset, I would like to thank Anand Labs and Newburgh Diagnostics for giving me this opportunity. A few housekeeping tips. Kindly mute all your videos, audios for some time. So I will start off the talk without further delays. So good evening and thank you all for joining me in this talk. So the topic I've been asked to discuss is managing kidney health during the lockdown. So the overview of the talk. One second. Yeah, so it's working now. Okay. So the overview of the topic is going to be first about introduction to coronavirus and COVID. Then few tips on how to manage healthy kidneys or those with normal kidney function, how to manage patients with abnormal kidneys or those with abnormal kidney function. I'll be talking a bit about all groups of patients. As some of you already know, kidney disease can be a spectrum of conditions ranging from simple protein leaking in the urine to kidneys failing and being on dialysis and having a transplant. So the next topic will be drugs and therapies. What is the latest therapies that are available for this? And then without diet, there is no completion of a kidney talk. So I think most of you must be aware of what COVID stands for. COVID is basically an abbreviation for coronavirus disease 2019. CO stands for corona, VI stands for virus, D for disease, and this was identified in 2019, hence the number 19. So let's find out how exactly this virus spreads. In the beginning of this year, there was still a lot of speculations as to how exactly the virus spreads. Now it's a bit more clear that the virus needs a vehicle to spread from person to person, and that vehicle is basically the respiratory droplets from an infected person. And these respiratory droplets are nothing but tiny droplets of saliva or the upper respiratory secretions, which come out in the air when a person coughs or sneezes. And once the virus lodges itself in the droplets, then they come out and they get deposited on surfaces or various objects, and subsequently spreads when another person touches it. Yet a lot of things needs to be found out about this virus. So this is a diagrammatic representation of how droplets act as a good vehicle for this little tiny particles, viruses, and then they form aerosols, and they are basically ready to spread. But one thing you have to remember is this virus needs a vehicle to spread. It doesn't basically hang around in the air, and those vehicles are provided by us in the form of droplets. And it's interesting to see that, let me minimize this. Yeah, it's interesting to see that the virus can stay alive for 3 hours in saliva, and it can stay for roughly about 4 hours in coins and about a day in paper surfaces. And this virus can stay alive for 2 to 3 days in plastics and stainless steel. Remember, we use a lot of plastics and stainless steel in our day-to-day activities. So what are the signs and symptoms? Most of you must be aware of it. It's a predominantly respiratory illness. It takes anywhere between 2 to 15 days for the symptoms to start from the time of infection. The common symptoms being fever, cough, cold, sore throat, shortness of breath, just like any other flu virus. So initial symptoms may not give us that clear picture. And there is usually a history of contact with a positive patient, or usually a history of travel to one of the red zones. And it's interesting to note that 98% of people with COVID infection have fever, and about 70+% have cough and shortness of breath. A few have myalgia and fatigue like any other viral illness, and the blood counts are abnormally low in about 65%. And interestingly, more than 80% of them have some sort of radiological abnormality, either an abnormal X-ray or a CT scan of the chest. So there are two aspects of the virus. One is how contagious it is, two, how dangerous it is. This is a nice pictorial diagram which basically gives us an idea how the SARS-CoV virus can infect somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 persons for every sick patient. It is not as bad as measles and smallpox, etc., which has already been eradicated, but still it is a very contagious virus. And coming to the virus mortality, meaning to say what are the percentage of patients who die with the virus? It's not that high. It's about 2 to 3% compared to the SARS or the MERS. However, the mortality has been surprisingly low in India for some unknown reason. Whereas in the Western countries, in United States, UK and Italy, the mortality has been very high for various reasons. So essentially, kidney diseases are divided into two groups. One is reversible kidney diseases, which is called as acute kidney injury, or AKI. This is caused mainly by dehydration, fluid loss, for example, in diarrhea, vomiting, blood loss, in certain infections, bacterial, viral, including COVID, fungal infections, and certain medications. Now, the terminology itself says that this is reversible, meaning to say they develop abnormal kidney function, and once the cause is treated, their kidney function returns to normal. There are a second group of diseases which are called irreversible kidney disease, also called the chronic kidney disease. Now, the commonest causes of chronic kidney disease are: number one is diabetes throughout the world, number two is blood pressure or hypertension, number three is other conditions like heart diseases, polycystic kidneys, inflammatory autoimmune conditions such as glomerulonephritis. Now, the main treatment for irreversible kidney disease is good control of the underlying cause. For example, in diabetics, good control of diabetes, and in blood pressure, in patients, good control of blood pressure. So the first question we have in mind is, does coronavirus affect kidneys with normal function? So the first 100 cases that were reported from Wuhan, there was a suggestion that kidneys may not be involved by the virus. However, further subsequent studies basically showed that in about 700 odd patients, showed that the kidney involvement can vary anywhere between 3 to 8%. And so this was one of the papers published in Kidney International, which initially, throw light that those with even normal kidney function can get affected by this COVID. And secondly, so the answer to the question, does coronavirus affect kidneys? The answer is yes, it does affect kidneys. People who are suffering from mild to moderate COVID are unlikely to develop kidney involvement. Whereas if the COVID infection is severe, then there is more chances of kidney involvement. As I was mentioning earlier, initial reports from Wuhan said that anywhere between 3 to 8% of the kidney involvement is recognized in COVID. But subsequent data from Italy, UK showed that it's actually higher than what we think. It's 15 to 25%. And the beauty of science is it keeps changing. And we have got more updates in the last couple of days that in severe COVID patients, actually more than 50% of the times kidney can get involved at various stages. So in one of the few earliest features when the kidney gets involved is that they start leaking proteins. About 40% start leaking protein. This is a way of kidney crying out to say, I'm not healthy. Now remember, this is percentages for those who are infected with COVID. I'm not talking about the general population. Now, in about 26% of those with blood in the urine, COVID basically can present as blood in the urine. And in about 13 to 14%, they present as increased creatinine or reduced GFR. And initially, it was thought that only 5% of people developing acute kidney injury require emergency dialysis support. Again, in the last couple of days, there has been bigger studies of nearly over 2,500 patients with COVID, where they say that about 20% of the patients require dialysis support. So there are various mechanisms by which acute kidney injury develops. So who are at risk? So those people who are elderly, 65 and above, and children, those with multiple comorbidities who have a predisposition to developing chronic kidney disease like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, liver problems, etc. Immunocompromised patients, cancer patients on chemotherapy, and those patients with HIV, those patients with immunosuppression, and severely obese patients. And those with pre-existing kidney disease like chronic kidney disease, dialysis, and transplants are also at risk. And I will again deal with them as mentioned earlier in a separate section. So what are the investigations available for COVID? The investigations that gives us a diagnosis with about 60 to 70% accuracy is the oropharyngeal swab for nucleic acid testing, or the RT-PCR. There are a number of other blood, urine tests and scans which can throw light on other organ function and indicate especially the renal impairment or kidney function tests, urine protein creatinine ratio, and ultrasound scan of the kidneys. So not everybody needs COVID testing. Remember, there are some priority and high priorities as advised by the WHO and CDC guidelines. Those who are exposed to a positive or suspected COVID patient, or those who are basically from a high risk area with symptoms, these are the people who need priority testing. So as of now in India, government being selective about who to test and who not to test. So what are the general preventive measures that we have to adopt for COVID? Most of you must have heard of this. So which is hand wash, using soap and water, hand rubs, social distancing, maintaining at least 3 to 6 feet, avoid touching nose, face, mouth frequently. Try to cover up your mouth and nose when you're coughing or sneezing. Stay home, especially if you're not well, and refrain from smoking and other activities that weakens the lungs, etc. So in this aspect, I would like to emphasize, see, these are all simple techniques that needs to be followed properly. And what my observation has been is that most of us fail to follow these techniques, simple techniques, in a robust way. And it is very surprising to see that that simple techniques can prevent major problems. So the first thing WHO recommends is to have a good hand hygienic technique with soap and water. The recommended time is 40 seconds to 60 seconds. Almost you need to wash your hands for a minute. And it involves various steps, 6 important steps of hand wash. This is freely available on the net, you can see, and please follow this at home. Whenever there is no option of washing hands with soap and water, one can use alcohol-based formulation. Alcohol percentage should be above 60%, and the entire procedure should last for 20 to 30 seconds, and it should cover all aspects of your hands. So the next dilemma question is, who should wear mask, and what are the types of masks? Should I wear masks, etc.? So the WHO and the CDC gives very clear-cut recommendations on this. The first one it says is, for general public, cloth masks are sufficient, and how exactly to make cloth masks and what are the materials, etc. It's available freely on the websites. And secondly, those with respiratory symptoms such as fever, cough, sneezing, etc., or those who are caring for somebody with respiratory illness, maybe a family member who has to nurse the attendant regularly, has to use 3-ply mask, which is a simple surgical mask. Those who are dealing with more unwell patients, like the healthcare workers and COVID positive patients, are recommended to use N95 mask. And it is very, very important to use the mask properly. What I have seen and observed in my practice in the last few months, the technique of using mask is absolutely poor. Most important thing is, once you wear the mask, you should not touch it. There is no point wearing a mask and touching it all over the mask, trying to adjust, because it beats the purpose. As I told you, these are droplets deposited on surfaces, including masks, virus droplets. That's the mode of spread. So if you have to touch the mask, you will have to basically wash your hands and then touch the mask, and then again wash your hands. And what I have also seen is improper techniques of wearing mask. The masks are dangling from one ear, then the masks are hanging around the neck with crisscross ties, etc. And also there is a fitness test that you have to pass just to see if the mask fits you well. There is no point if the mask doesn't fit, because the droplets can always seep through the open spaces. So these are the general tips that I gave you for preventive care for COVID. Now, general tips to look after your kidney, because we may have to combine both if you are going to look after the kidney, because we know that kidney can be affected by COVID. So the first thing is, this is for patients with normal kidney function. You have to drink plenty of fluids, hydrate yourself very well. Approximate recommended fluid intake is anywhere between 2 to 3 liters per day. You have to have a good balanced diet. And with the current lockdown and current isolation and home stay, one has to make sure the sedentary lifestyle is not followed. They have regular exercises, a way to burn calories. And another important thing is a lot of our patients are diabetic or hypertensive. It's important to look after your diabetes and hypertension very well by having monitors at home. Blood glucose monitors are available, blood pressure monitors are available. It has to be monitored on a regular basis and then fed back to your healthcare team. I know it is very difficult to visit hospitals in such environments, which is where I think government has opened up doors for teleconsults. So teleconsults are available, which is safe form of consulting your doctor in case of a non-emergencies. And very, very important that you don't miss out your medications, because we know that comorbidities are not good for this disease. And more importantly, if you have a cough, cold, fever, do not do not try to conceal it. Do not take over-the-counter medications, as it can do more harm to you and your family members. So now coming to how do we manage patients with abnormal kidney function? So these are basically three broad categories of patients. First is the general nephrology and the chronic kidney disease patients who have mild to moderate kidney disease, or or an autoimmune disorder, or a antibody mediated disease, etc. But their kidney function is reasonable to have a life free of dialysis or transplant. The second group of patients are those with kidney disease less than 15% who need dialysis support for survival. And the third group of patients who have passed the stage of dialysis, have had a transplant, and are living a near normal lifestyle, but with medications. So the first group of patients are those with general nephrology problems and chronic kidney disease. So how does the virus affect these patients? So the data that is available in the literature so far shows that the presentation is very similar to that of general population. It is very similar to the symptoms I mentioned earlier: fever, cough, myalgia, shortness of breath, the same set of symptoms, no difference. And the precautions that you have to take for is as general as for anything else in any other patients with non-CKD related problems. And again, more important things for this group of patients is do not miss your follow-ups, do not miss your medications. If you have to get your kidney function tests done, arrange for home collection of blood samples, and numerous labs are providing this service very efficiently throughout Bangalore now. And encourage mail order of pharmacy, avoid contact with people. And there's always a question, doctor, shall I take hydroxychloroquine? I've heard that this is beneficial to prevent virus. I would not advise. If you don't have any symptoms, if you are hale and healthy, I would definitely refrain from using such medications. And for healthcare staff, we have been advised to safely defer biopsies and immunosuppression when possible. And it has been shown that the impact of COVID on CKD has not yet been completely reported to be any different. So the second, this slide is basically for the healthcare staff. Sorry about the busy slide. These are the American Society of Nephrology guidelines for management of glomerular disease patients during this pandemic. So there are a number of points that they can go through. I'll skip this slide. So coming to the patients who are on dialysis and what is their risk of contracting COVID, what is their presentation? They in theory are at risk of contracting COVID more than that of general population, because they visit hospitals and they are in a room with 10 people on dialysis, and they have a degree of immune dysregulation. And what the studies have shown is that presentation is very similar to that of general population. And surprisingly, it's actually those who have contracted COVID have milder disease and lesser mortality rates, probably for various reasons. However, there is still, we cannot draw any robust conclusions that dialysis patients are safer than general population. There are some studies to say that dialysis populations may be at a higher risk of death compared to the general population. This time will tell us the answer for this. So the management for dialysis patients are pretty similar to what I have advised for those with those for general public. Most important thing is wearing mask for a dialysis patient has become compulsion according to many guidelines. So that is where I would just sort of lay emphasis on. And there are several different aspects for dialysis patients which needs to be focused on. The first thing is do not miss dialysis sessions. I know there were transport issues during the lockdown, and there has been recommendations from some authorities that missing dialysis is okay. But again, that has to be by case basis after discussion, thorough discussion with the nephrologist. But the overall consensus is that missing dialysis session in the long term may be more harmful. So it is very important to arrange safe and secure transport in advance for those who are on peritoneal dialysis. In such scenarios, home dialysis may be a better option for many who have that provision of doing so. And teleconsultations and keeping in touch with the healthcare team is very vital and very important. And if you think as a patient or as a general public, if you are not well, the best thing is you can ring up the hospital helpline and get to speak to one of the healthcare staff and take guidance from them. Because there are two pathways. In most of the hospitals, we have a COVID pathway and we have a non-COVID pathway. So the COVID pathway is those who present with symptoms. This is not only to safeguard the patient, but also the general public, the other healthcare staff from contracting infection, and also a way of preventing the spread. So it is vital to know what are the COVID pathways and non-COVID pathways in your hospitals. And it is very important to be transparent and communicate well with your healthcare staff and do not conceal any symptoms or any things you think is important. So this is a very nice slide by one of the nephrologists from Mumbai. She had posted it on Twitter. So these are certain precautions I said that you need to follow at home. So if you have any symptoms, it is always important that you don't take a public transport. You inform the driver of the vehicle, because he also can be a potential carrier. Wear mask, go to the hospital along the COVID path, go to the waiting area, keep distance from people, use sanitizers, etc., etc. And you can find the healthcare staff dressed with level 2 or level 3 healthcare, or sometimes full PPE, depending upon the need of the hour. So these are the guiding principles for our healthcare staff. So please be reassured that it is not right to turn away any patient from the dialysis. We can still provide dialysis for patients even if they are tested COVID positive, and we have an obligation to do so. And we have to just follow the signs, follow the infection control policies, and maintain the highest standards of healthcare. Leadership from individual units is very critical for assurance of our patients. Transparency and communication is very, very important. And we need to create an environment that gives you adequate support for our patients, dialysis and medical staff. So there is plenty of literature available. More relevant is our directive from the Government of India, Ministry of Family, so Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. There are guidelines for dialysis of COVID patients. And also there are some checklists for preparedness of dialysis units, how one unit can prepare for a COVID pandemic. So coming to the next session, which is COVID and kidney transplant, the data is again limited. Immunosuppressed patients are probably at high risk of any infections. So they would probably, the assumption is that they may be at higher risk of COVID infection as well. So the recommendation of Transplant Society from the United States was that wherever there is widespread community transmission, there has to be a temporary suspension of the transplant program because there are a number of aspects to it, and the true risk of donor-derived transmission is still unclear. And in case, if there are any emergency transplants that are required as a life-saving procedures, then you need the proper testing of the donors and the recipients for COVID screening. So a lot of you might have had a plan of getting a transplant. This would have been suspended in the last few months. So for such patients, this question is very vital. Should we restart transplants? There are a number of clinical, system-related, ethical and legal dilemmas, pros and cons. We can talk about it the whole day, but for now there is an I sought position statement for transplantation worth going through this document, because that gives a little bit of clarity on the fact that we can restart transplants. And I think some centers in the north have restarted. Today we had a meeting at our center to see how we can restart our program. So it is center specific and has to be taken on a case by case decision making process. So data on kidney transplant patients. So I think a lot of kidney transplant patients of mine would be anxious as to know more details about what are the implications of COVID in a kidney transplant patient. This was the first case of COVID in transplant recipient reported in China, Wuhan. I think this was almost to 20 odd day, 14 day stay for the patient in the hospital. Various strategies were followed, including reduction of immunosuppression, and finally it is good to know that the patient made it safely home. And since then, there are a number of case series reported. Case series is length of 15 to 20 cases that has been reported from Italy, Spain, United States, UK, and China. And all the experiences say that presentation is very similar to that of general population, and the mortality or the case fatality rates seems to be slightly higher in our transplant patients, almost 15 to 25% compared to the general population. So my advice for kidney transplant patients is please do follow general precautions. In addition to it, make sure that you self-isolate at home, avoid crowds as much as possible. If you have work from home options, please utilize it, and stay in touch with the transplant team. It is very important. Lockdown doesn't mean that you stop teleconsultations and you do not contact your healthcare professionals. It is very important to contact for various reasons, including factors like changing of brands, etc. Because I know there have been deficiencies in certain brands not being available. If the first advice is try not to change the brands, because the drug levels may be different. If there is a circumstance where there is no other medicine available and you have to change the brand, then please do it in conjunction with your nephrologist or the healthcare team, with monitoring of kidney function and the drug levels. And please do not miss medications, as transplant patients are at higher risk of rejections if medicines are missed. And home collection for tests are still an option, as I mentioned earlier. Stock up your supplies, and awareness of drug interactions is very important. So avoid any medications without consulting your nephrologist. This is the position statement from ISOT, which says that mainstay of therapy is supportive care. There has been no single drug approved by US FDA. Everything is in the experimental phase, and more promising drugs like colchicine are coming up as experimental therapies. So whether to use antimalarials like HCQS and chloroquine, it's a topic of debate. US and the French authorities feel that it has some benefit. However, the EU regulators and WHO say that the science doesn't support the decision. So the jury is out. So these are the few antiviral therapies available in the market. So no need for renal function adjustment for majority of the antivirals. This is a busy slide, but essentially this is to emphasize the fact that as a healthcare professional, if you have any doubts about drug interaction, there's a nice website by the University of Liverpool where you can track the drug interactions. So one other question I get from patients is, if I am immunosuppressed as a transplant patient, can I decrease the dose of immunosuppression? The answer is no. If you are asymptomatic, majority advise that please do not make any changes to your medicines. So there are a number of evolving issues. You have to watch out for the space. Every day we are getting a new update about this virus. So when, how to test, who to test, where to test remains a little bit ambiguous at the moment. When to stop these precautions? the answer is very difficult because it looks like this virus is here to stay for some time. It is not like after the lockdown, the virus is going to go away. And how to dialyze within facility with infrastructural challenges and the future with we may have issues with PPE supplies, etc. So one of the main areas that I wanted to cover in the last few slides is diet. So those with normal kidney function, I mentioned about the diet. Those with some degree of kidney impairment, what I would still say is low protein diet is not advisable, because majority of them ask me, if I have more protein, will it damage the kidney? I think if you have the recommended daily allowance of protein, which is about 1 milligram per kg body weight, it is not going to damage the kidney, especially the vegetarian proteins. What you have to monitor is for high potassium levels, which certain foods have high potassium that can be avoided. And salt is like a poison for kidneys, because salt can predispose to high blood pressures and can cause fluid retentions and can in fact worsen kidney function. So low salt diet is good. Alternate or no salt is not good. And there are some websites like the National Kidney Foundation, which gives you a little bit of insight about healthy foods. And if you are not on dialysis, then I don't think a very strict fluid restriction is needed for all stages of kidney diseases. So it has to be tailor-made as per the individual patients. So for dialysis patients, we encourage good quality, high protein diets, because proteins are the building blocks of immunity. And to be able to fight these viruses and bacteria, you need your immunity. And restricting protein may alter the numbers, but may not really improve the kidney function. So this is a sort of brief rundown on the diet for dialysis patients. Some of the dialysis patients do need water restrictions, and I know, given that it is summer, it is very difficult to control fluids. One easy way of few tips to reduce fluid intake would be: number one, focus on low salt diet. Number two, you can use ice cubes to constantly wet your mouth. Use mouth washes, mouth rinse, and you can also use mints or chewing gums to try and chew and to try to quench the thirst. Okay, so to conclude, this is my last slide. There are a few things that we have to focus here. The first thing is we don't have a robust treatment for this virus. So we have to emphasize on prevention. And as I told you, it is a must to do those simple things like hand wash, wearing masks properly. This prevents not only the spread of virus, but also eventually may help eradicate the disease. The second thing is to educate and improve the awareness. The main thing is people need to educate other people and spread the awareness of health. And this is a virus, as I told you, it is not a virus which is going to go away after lockdown. Look at the trend. It's still bad. Still, as of yesterday, we had in India, we had 3,400 cases detected, almost 60,000 in total. So we have to learn new things about this virus, keep ourselves updated and adapt to the situation. Okay, the focus, when we are focusing on this virus, it's also important to focus on other aspects of health, such as your diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, your regular hospital checks for whatever the underlying condition is, and also take care of your mental health. Keep yourself actively engaged in activities, exercises, etc. So the best way forward is, I think, whilst we hope that vaccines and cure can put an end to this disease, we have to plan and prepare for the worst. With this, I would like to just show you some of the resources where I got information and where you can also get information for free. So please do go through some of these useful websites. And with this, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. So we had a few questions which Maria will take, my colleague Maria will take you through. So Maria, can you ask the questions?
There are a few questions on the one of the questions is about zinc supplements. Can a COPD patient take zinc supplements as a preventive measure?
You see, vitamins and zinc supplements will not do any harm. So I don't see a great benefit in taking, although there were some studies to say that if you take vitamins and zinc supplements, it may help in rebuilding of your respiratory epithelium. So I don't see a harm in taking it. So you can take it, but I don't see a robust evidence behind giving it to prevent COVID. But yes, yeah, answer is yes.
Okay, thanks, doctor. There's
Hi,
another question from one is Kamakshi.
Okay.
Type 1 diabetes without insulin. Is there any treatment available for that?
How old is the patient?
He has not put that.
See, she's a diabetic on insulin, is it?
Without taking insulin.
Type 1 diabetic without insulin.
Yes.
Okay. See, if the sugars are well controlled, I think seeing a diabetologist and managing the sugars would be the right way forward. Because if somebody is insulin dependent with type 1 diabetes, they can be referred for pancreas transplants and stuff. But for her, with type 1 diabetes, not on insulin, I think general precautions of what a diabetic patient has to take, that has to be followed, and they have to look after their eyes, go for regular ophthalmology check, kidney check. As I told you, some of the blood tests, urine tests may help determine the kidney function, and followed by regular endocrine checks.
Okay. There is a question from Ms. Jayashree Prasad. She
Mhm.
says her father is 87 years old and has a urine protein creatinine ratio of 0.17. What
Okay.
medication do you advise? And he's a diabetic.
Okay. Basically, see, it's a very small amount of proteinuria. A more confirmatory test would be a 24-hour urine protein, and would advise an ultrasound scan of his kidneys and a blood test called serum creatinine. Based on these three tests, and depending upon what medication he is on, he can consult a nephrologist. But for a protein creatinine ratio of 0.17, I wouldn't see that as a sort of alarming number. They can probably take a teleconsult at this phase with a nephrologist.
Okay, doctor. There is another question.
Yeah,
How
I
much
think that.
protein per day is...
Hello, sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
How much protein per day is safe if you're on muscle building?
Okay, so I think, see, the recommended daily allowance of protein is somewhere between 0.8 grams per kg per day to 1.5 grams per kg per day. So good quality protein within this limit is advisable. Taking alternative protein supplements excess of daily recommended allowance is not generally advisable, because it can put pressure not only on the kidneys but also on the other organs.
There is another question on hypertension tablets and impact on kidneys.
See, hypertension itself is the second leading cause for chronic kidney disease. So good blood pressure control is what is required to prevent chronic kidney disease. So my advice would be is to take the blood pressure medications regularly and control the blood pressure to prevent the progression of chronic kidney disease. Blood pressure medications do not damage the kidneys, as contrary to the popular belief.
Okay. There is another question, doctor. There is a little, they say that there is a little amount of foam in urine. Is it normal?
Foaming of urine is not normal. I would advise urine tests like urine routine, 24-hour urine protein, because foaming of urine may be initial sign of protein leak. So again, this is a condition where they will need urine test, blood tests, and probably a teleconsult with nephrologist, depending upon the severity of the illness.
Okay. And another question. For a post-transplant patient over 10 years and who is at home always, is it compulsory to wear a mask?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it depends on who are the household members. If the household members are, the recommendation is no. As of now, the recommendation is no. But the common sense approach would be that they are at a slightly higher risk of contracting this illness. So if they have a family member who is a healthcare worker, for example, or who has to be go out and he's at risk, then wearing a single surgical mask 3-ply is advisable.
Okay. And can type 2 diabetes be cured by exercise and diet?
I don't think cure would be the right word. It can be controlled. As of now, there is no definitive cure for diabetes apart from a pancreas transplant, which is not a simple procedure. So, no, it can be controlled. But again, I don't think there's a cure.
Should donors have to take special precautions like transplant patients?
No, donors who have normal kidney function, they have to pretty much follow the tips that I gave earlier to prevent COVID infections and to prevent its transmission, and regular health checks, maybe depending upon how far out they are from the donation, maybe a yearly check of their blood pressure, their blood tests for creatinine, and urine tests would be useful.
Okay. There is a question from Simran. Can transplant patients go back to work? She works as an admin in a school.
Yeah, as of now, I don't think schools are functional in the fact that they're not taking pupils or students. So I think they should be able to go back to work if the kidney function is normal. But with the precautions I said, good hand washing techniques, and it is advisable for her to wear mask, at least a surgical mask with a 3-ply mask.
Okay. What is the frequency of kidney function test for diabetes? How often should they take it?
It's a good question. It depends on what level of the kidney, what level is their kidney function at. If they have normal kidney function, then I would suggest an annual test of kidney function with a blood and urine test should be sufficient. But if they have lesser kidney function or proteinuria, more frequent tests, maybe once in 3 to 6 months would be beneficial. So if they have any doubts, let them have a teleconsultation with a nephrologist and take it from there. But again, these are simple tests.
Okay. There is a question says that the person is getting recurring boils, and because it's recurring, does it mean that the dosage he takes for immunosuppressants are high?
It depends on the exact dose of immunosuppression he's taking and the indication for which he's on immunosuppression. But generally, boils are due to bacterial infections. So that may be a subtle indication that yes, the load of immunosuppression is high. However, there is no definitive marker for measuring the immunosuppression levels. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. We'll have to put all the pieces together, weigh and see. Because if it is for maintaining adequate kidney function and to prevent rejection and stuff, maybe the trade-off may be that he may be at slightly higher risk of infections, but that amount of immunosuppression is needed to keep the kidney going. So it really depends in what context they're talking. But yes, boils are a suggestion of infections.
Okay. There is a question from Facebook. Having Herbalife protein to lose weight, is it bad for kidneys?
See, it's not proven beyond doubt that it is good for kidneys. Anything non-allopathic, which is not proven beyond doubt that is good for kidneys, I would avoid it.
Okay. There is a question. Can heat be the cause of hematuria in an SS patient who has a history of interstitial nephritis and acute, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the word, pyelonephritis?
Pyelonephritis, okay. So basically what he's asking is it normal to have a blood in the urine with underlying condition? If you have blood in the urine, definitely it's abnormal. Certain kidney conditions can cause a small amount of blood leak in the urine for pretty much a long time without doing any harm. So it is better to get checked with a nephrologist if he has doubt about the blood in the urine, especially if they are above 45. They have to be screened for, and if they are male patients, then they have to be screened for certain prostate-related illness. So it is better to check with a nephrologist.
Hemoglobin and kidney function are related? That's a question.
Yes, that's a very good question. Basically, those who have chronic kidney disease stage 4 and 5, one of the main functions of kidney is to generate a hormone called erythropoietin. So, as the kidney function comes down, people are at risk of developing low hemoglobin or anemia. The hemoglobin is low for two reasons. One is for iron deficiency, and the second one is because of erythropoietin deficiency. And simple iron replacement or erythropoietin replacement can be the answer for treatment of anemia.
What precautions should a person with only one kidney take? I think doctors answered that.
Yeah, it's like similar to that of a donor.
Can tacrolimus level test be done by home collection? Yes, we can do that.
Yeah. Yes.
And we can come and get your sample collection done.
Yeah.
What antibiotics can I take to stop the recurring boils since there are bacterial infections?
As I told you, it depends in the bigger context of rather than taking antibiotics blindly. It is better to see the nephrologist and try to see if the immunosuppressive burden can be reduced safely. And it also depends which area the boils are, whether local hygienic measures and local ointments can prevent recurrent boils rather than blindly taking antibiotics for long term, which is not advisable.
Okay. What is the relevance of ketosis in kidney function?
Ketosis in kidney function.
Yeah, KEOTOSIS.
Okay. Now, I would probably frame the question more in the right way. Probably they would mean that what is the role of keto diet in kidney function?
Maybe.
Yeah. So I think that's what, because slightly sort of unrelated things. See, if you have diabetes and if you miss insulin doses or tablets, then there is risk of sugars going up and developing diabetic ketoacidosis, condition where the ketone bodies and the acid levels build up. So when you treat that, it obviously comes down. So that is called ketosis. So a keto diet has been quite popular in the market to reduce weight. I would certainly not advise for kidney patients.
Okay. What duration TAC level test required for transplant time of 1 year?
So how frequently?
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. See, it depends on how your TAC levels have behaved and what is your condition of health. Assuming that the patient is stable with good kidney function, after 1 year, roughly about once in 3 months, TAC levels should be sufficient. But it is important to monitor TAC levels on a long-term basis.
Okay. Just two more questions, doctor.
Certainly,
can transplant patients opt for integrated medicine?
I would advise against if integrated medicine, from what I gather, is a combination of non-allopathic and allopathic medicines. If it is more like a naturopathy without involving of taking non-allopathic medications or herbal medications, if it involves only modification in their lifestyle, diet, healthy living, probably yes. If not, then I would advise against it.
Last, I think 2 more questions have come in. A person says that his hemoglobin is 18 to 19, and will high hemoglobin affect kidneys?
Not directly. I don't think it directly. They need to see a hematologist, or certain times we see this in kidney conditions post-transplant. Certain patients have high hemoglobins of 18, 19. For them, we do bloodletting. Per se, it should not damage the kidneys.
Okay. Someone wants to understand plasma therapy and if it's useful for COVID cases.
It's very early. I mean, that is a good question. I have just mentioned that plasma therapy as a experimental therapy, it still remains very experimental for various reasons. But again, as I told you, so it's a handful of cases with lot of caveats and lot of problems. So lot of therapies are very experimental in COVID. So I would still bank on prevention and supportive treatment.
A patient wants to know if they postpone the TAC level tests, will there be any issues because it's not available locally and easily?
It depends how far out they are from transplant and what were their levels in the past. If the levels have been stable, maybe postponing it for a week or two is not a bad idea. If not, I think it is better to consult the nephrologist, get a letter from the appropriate authorities for him to travel for the follow-up.
Okay, last question. What are the symptoms of if you're suffering from a kidney disease? How do we know that we are suffering from kidney disease?
Yeah, see, that's a good question. It's actually most of the irreversible kidney disease and to some extent reversible kidney disease are asymptomatic. So that's where the challenge comes. Um, they don't present with any symptoms in the early stages of kidney disease. But at later stages, when the kidney function goes down to less than 30%, people usually have very non-specific symptoms like tiredness. And as the kidney function goes down further, they may have symptoms of waste product accumulation like loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, losing weight, having generalized itching, which is not explained by any skin conditions, and also fluid retention like developing swelling in the legs. So these are some of the symptoms in later stages of kidney disease, which is where I think monitoring and screening for kidney diseases is very vital.
So how often would you suggest the screening to be done, doctor?
It depends on what their underlying kidney condition is. For somebody who is diabetic, hypertensive, has got risk factors for chronic kidney disease, maybe at least once a year if their kidney function is normal and stuff, if not more frequently. For somebody who has family history of kidney disease, obviously, again, a regular check would be advisable, but it depends on individual case.
Last question. The person says, I'm taking tablets for sugar from 2008. Will it affect kidneys?
Sorry, can you come back?
The person is on medication, diabetes medication from 2008. Will it affect his kidneys?
I don't see, there's a wrong concept that diabetes and BP medicines affect the kidney. It's actually the other way. It's the diabetes and hypertension which affect the kidney. If you don't control your diabetes, that is the main cause for patients ending up on dialysis requiring transplant. So as I mentioned in my earlier slide, a condition called chronic kidney disease. The commonest cause of chronic kidney disease is not because of medications. It is because of diabetes and lack of proper control of diabetes. So in fact, diabetic medications protect the kidney. Same with blood pressure. If you don't look after your blood pressure, that is going to kill the kidney. It is not BP medicines. There is often a myth that if you take more tablets, it's bad for the kidney. I mean, that's a myth, unfortunately, not a true one. So it is good diabetic and blood pressure control that looks after your kidney well.
Okay. One more question has come in, doctor. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I am okay.
This person says, I'm a 55-year-old with a heart problem.
Okay.
In a span of 15 days, my creatinine level went from 1.5 to 8. What food should I consume and I shouldn't? I'm currently on dialysis. I don't have any BP or diabetes issue.
I think it is better he sees a nephrologist and finds out the cause for why the kidney function jumped. There may be many reasons. I don't think diet per se cures kidney disease. However, diet may be important in controlling certain aspects of kidney disease like high potassium and stuff. So it is better if he consults a nephrologist and tries to understand what caused this jump in the kidney function.
There was one question about Newburgh and the precautions they take for COVID testing. So I'll quickly answer that. So at the labs, the staff are equipped with PPE suits, which includes the full body suit, the goggles, the face shield, the gloves, shoe covers, hair covers. And the COVID testing is done in an isolated place. It's not part of the main laboratory. And trained technicians are used to collect samples. And we follow all the ICMR guidelines and the state government guidelines. So the staff are safe and the people who come in for the test are also safe. So with that, I think there are no more questions and we can conclude. Doctor, thank you so much for this enlightening session.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a very good interactive question with a lot of wonderful questions. I hope this session has been useful for our people. So, I mean, thank you once again, all of you, for patient listening.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. Good
to all
session.
the attendants. Thank you so
See you.
much. Have a good
Bye.
evening.
You too. Good
Bye-bye.
evening. Bye.